Say the Semantics, episode 334. It is August 16th, 2025. My name is Myro. This is the podcast where I ramble on for a bit about some shit, recording this on a Saturday evening / afternoon. I just got back, well, not just, yesterday. I got back from a little excursion that I took with a friend up in the mountains. I decided to kind of embrace a little bit of a digital nomad kind of thing. It was good. I felt that I was able to still kind of maintain what I've been able to do with, just working remote and all that stuff. So it was good. I think it gave me a little more insight into kind of what type of work setup I would kind of want to have moving forward. And, it was good though. I had a nice time. Elevation was like super high up there. So I was, it really kind of humbled me in terms of my just being in shape. Like I felt very just kind of out of it. I feel that I'm in decent shape for the most part, but my endurance has just completely gone out the window. I feel like I just have not at all like embraced being just active on just like a regular basis. I have not at all, ran or did any type of just conditioning. So that just is completely bad right now, which is, I haven't ran in a long time. I don't even really want to look at how much time it's been since I've ran. Probably just like an embarrassing amount of time. So I just kind of want to, I don't know. Part of me wants to try to get back into that a little bit more, but also I'm also keenly aware that I have my limitations in terms of just like the amount of time that it takes for me to get back into that kind of thing. And also, do I want to dedicate that much time to exercising? It's things that I'm kind of, just sort of contemplating, and I feel like I have like a pretty decent thing going for the most part. I feel that I've been pretty active going to the gym, but yeah, just the thing that has sort of fallen off, unfortunately, is my conditioning and that kind of thing, and my running ability, because I just haven't done it, you know what I mean? So maybe that's something that I'll try to kind of ease back into, but for the most part, I feel that I feel like I like what I'm doing right now, and so maybe I'll incorporate some things, but we'll see how that goes. But anyways, just being up in higher elevation really was just like, oh yeah, this is not, I am not in the same position as I was, 10 years ago, which is crazy to say, but it's true. No, I'm just not. That's just kind of the reality of things, another thing that I kind of recognize, this is not very, I guess it's health related too. So I usually like to have milk with a lot of stuff, I have milk with my coffee. I have milk with like cereal and granola and stuff. But it was and I don't know if it's due to the type of milk that I was using, because I bought like a different kind of brand and it was like low fat milk. So I don't know, was that the issue? Like, should I have just gotten whole milk? I have no idea. But I really noticed that like my stomach was not happy with that. So the first like couple of days I had like milk, additional milk along with the milk that I have with like my coffee. And it just did not sit with my stomach super well. And so I tested it out the following day. I was like, you know what, I'm just going to just go raw, like no milk with the cereal. And, that was kind of like a clear, that test was like, I don't know. I felt that was pretty evident that the lactose was having an effect on me, you know what I mean? I'm sure there's, if I took like a study or something like that, that would kind of give bit more of a clear indication. But honestly, I feel pretty confident that and this is something that I kind of have noticed with having just kind of a little more lactose products. I mean, specifically milk, I would say, is that it just unfortunately affects like my digestion. And so I substituted the following day. I substituted it with yogurt, and that was fine. I didn't really have any effect there. So I think if it's just whole milk, in a way, if I have too much of it, it's not gonna be great. Which kind of sucks, you know what I mean? But also, it's not like the end of the world, you know? I think that I can kind of, I can do alternative milk products. There's plenty of those out there. But also I think yogurt seems to be okay for now. So I can kind of do like a parfait mix instead of like a cereal kind of mix. So that seems to be okay. But yeah, unfortunately I was like, damn, dude, am I just building up, like, not building up, but am I growing to have some type of intolerance of sorts? A bit of a kind of head scratcher, but you know what? It is what it is. I can adapt. It's not the worst thing. So that was like another thing that I kind of noticed over this past week, is that milk might not be the most favorable, especially like an excessive amount of milk. More than like a cup or something like that might be too much for me, I guess. So that's kind of something that I have to sort of keep a pulse on. But yeah, other than that, it's been a nice week. And I'm just kind of, just trying to enjoy the rest of this week, before, transitioning back into kind of a more typical work routine, which is, I don't know. We'll see how that goes. We'll see how motivated I'm feeling for it. Since I have gotten back, I've been craving playing The Witcher. I did not bring my Switch 2 up there, which is good. I didn't want to kind of have additional, distractions and stuff like that. That was not really my intention. But yeah, I was kind of craving playing The Witcher, and I played a good chunk of it last night, and I played a little bit more today, and just had it's so fun, man. There's so much to do, as I've sort of talked about before, and each kind of, even some of the minor side quests, the one where you're hunting down some monsters, those are very compelling, along with kind of the main story side quests. So it's just like there's so many types of quests. There's also Gwent, which I've talked about, and there's just more kind of threads that you can sort of follow. There's I think, I don't know how open-ended the, in terms of like the decision making you can go forward with, is for like the main storyline, because it feels like there are ways that you can kind of tackle the different objectives and stuff in a different order. But there are kind of like level recommendations slash limitations, right? So if you're like a lower level, it's maybe not recommended to do quests that are in a different part of the world and that kind of thing. But I think I'm like close enough. Like, I've been gaining quite a lot of levels with all of the quests that I've been doing, and also some of the main quests that I've been doing. Those provide quite a lot of experience, so like that levels you up pretty quickly. So I feel like I'm close enough range to where I can kind of take on those other quests if I really wanted to, you know what I mean? I also feel like I've leveled up Geralt, and I've gotten some pretty good equipment for him, where I can kind of take on some of those higher level, maybe higher level quests if I want to. So it can be a bit of a challenge, but it's not like this like astronomical feat. You know what I mean? Like, it's not impossible. So there's like a bit of a challenge there that you can kind of take on. I'm also not playing at like the highest difficulty setting, because I'm not I'm not interested in trying to. The combat, as I talked about, is not like the most, complex or just the most like dynamic. So I just, I don't really care too much to engage with that. Like, I just, as long as I can kind of hold out my own and, tackle the quests and tackle certain, hunting missions the best way that I can. It's really not, the highest, the thing that I've been most interested in. What I have been interested in is the storylines, reading up on various characters and, how Geralt connects with them and how they are a part of his past, and how, how you sort of, how you can decide to kind of move forward with all of these different characters, right? And, all of the decisions that you make can have further impact on and consequences later down the line. So it's all super intricately tied together. So it's just kind of, that's kind of the thing that's really spurring me on to really seeing like, okay, what's going to be next? Like, what kind of, what's going to be like the result of my decision here? And am I going to be able to reconcile with that character later down the line? What kind of effects is that going to have? Are there going to be any potential benefits of making this decision now versus later, right? So it's good stuff. It's really engaging, and it really is like, man, I've been missing out, man. This is like this kind of like fully like AAA kind of gaming experience is something that I've not, super engaged with. And so, those kinds of, gaming and games are now sort of, available with like Switch 2 and stuff. Witcher 3, you had Switch 1 version available, but I felt that, I felt getting the Switch 2, or, getting it along with the Switch 2 kind of added to the experience with like faster load times and all that kind of stuff. So it's good. It's cool. And knowing that this was made by CD Projekt Red, who also have gone on to make Cyberpunk 2077, I am a little bit more interested in maybe getting into that world of Cyberpunk now. If it's kind of made with sort of the same design philosophies in terms of kind of this more open world kind of experience with RPG mechanics and all that kind of stuff, that kind of intrigues me. So I feel I'm a little bit more maybe interested in getting into that world, if the game is at all kind of similar to, what they sort of laid out in The Witcher 3. So that's good. That's really cool. And then you got the Switch 2 version of Cyberpunk 2077 as well. So that's like perfect. So it's cool. This is kind of like open up things a little bit, It's not that I'm unaware of AAA games or anything like that, but I've, it hasn't really been, the highest interest for me necessarily, right? I've been a lot more, the games that I've engaged with are definitely to a much smaller scale. And then on top of that is like, I only had a Switch, so I was kind of limited in terms of the things that I could play too. So, I don't know. I don't want to put like all this praise on, the Switch 2 after its release. But it's really worked out for me. Again, there are so many things that you can critique in terms of the corporate practices, the pricing and all that kind of stuff. But I think if you're like a responsible consumer and you're not going like excessively out of your way to purchase things and support some anti-consumer practices, like I think it's not like the worst thing, you know what I mean? I've been able to make kind of like the Switch work for me really well, and I feel like I've been able to really really make the Switch 2 work for me as well, in terms of it being a very compelling gaming device with kind of both the backwards compatibility and then some of the added games that I haven't been able to play up until this point. So it's been good. It's been good. Yeah, this is like, there's been, I think there's been some discussion lately in regards to maybe the lack of, we don't exactly know what the next kind of releases are. We don't really have like release dates for some bigger titles coming up in the Switch 2 library, with like things like Metroid Prime 4 and some other potential games that have been yet to be announced or released yet. So there's maybe a little bit of this kind of hesitancy, like, oh man, there's maybe I'm seeing a little bit, and this is like a very, this is likely to be like a vocal minority of sorts, but I am seeing maybe some buyer's remorse regarding getting the Switch 2 early on and adopting it early on in its lifetime. That was kind of a concern of mine going into it. There was one of the things where it was like, oh, the games kind of have to be there and stuff. And for me, the games are there. There are so many other games that I still have yet to play. And then there are also, some other bigger releases that I am interested in playing as well. And those are available for me. So I am not I'm not lacking for any, I'm not lacking for any games. I understand there's like a desire for there to be a bigger, lineup of first party games, which I get. I totally understand that. But if you look at previous launch lineups, you're getting kind of a similar caliber, you know what I mean? And you already have two big first party games with Mario Kart World and then with Donkey Kong Bonanza. So I think if you sort of look back and compare this sort of launch lineup / window for the Switch 2 versus older consoles, it's pretty comparable, and honestly it might even be better in a lot of instances, right? Of course with the Switch 1 you had Breath of the Wild, and then later in the year you had Super Mario Odyssey. But outside of those are two of the biggest, two of the big first party titles for Nintendo, and I think that's going to be hard to beat. But I think in most cases it's you're going to have maybe one big game at launch versus multiple over the course of a few months. And it's only been a few months since the console has been released. So I think the lineup is just going to continue to improve, in my opinion. I'm looking at it from a fairly positive perspective, I already have so many games that I have games that I haven't even yet played yet that's in my library, and I have games that I'm also looking forward to purchasing, which I don't have. I just haven't bought them yet. So there's a lot. You know what I mean? There's a lot to. There's a lot for me that I feel is enough for me to have justified purchasing the system, right? But I understand, right? I understand wanting more, especially the price of the console being pretty high, and then just the cost of the games being incredibly high. So I don't blame anyone for feeling maybe a little let down in terms of not getting what they maybe got for. But look, my big things were backwards compatibility. If there were any games that were compelling enough for me to get the get the system, and those are kind of the two big points for me, and I think those sort of fulfilled that on that front. I know there's little things here and there. I guess the game key card is a whole situation in itself, and I totally understand, just not having physical, not having access to physical media. That is definitely concerning, absolutely. But yeah, outside of those, kind of some of the other issues that may exist, I feel pretty good about it. I feel pretty good about it. I think there's plenty to criticize, but it's worked out for me so far. But yeah, Witcher 3, I've been playing, just doing, I think Mario Kart World is like perfect for just me, just like hopping on like maybe like once every couple of days or something like that and doing a race, doing Knockout Tour and just kind of enjoying that. Maybe doing free roam here and there and just kind of vibing to the music. It's really, I'm not really expecting too much from Mario Kart. And it's been fine. That's been good. And yeah, I mean, there's still so much, and I don't know how much, like, I mean, I feel like I'm going to be putting in so many hours into The Witcher. I don't really know what to expect, what the next thing is going to be for me coming up. So yeah, I mean, I'm just going to keep my eyes peeled in terms of like what I want to play. I think I am kind of leaning, and this is probably going to be later down the line. I feel like Donkey Kong Bonanza is going to be like a perfect like fall going into winter game. So I'll most likely be picking that up later this year. But yeah, outside of that, I mean, yeah, I think The Witcher is most likely going to occupy most of my time for at this current moment. So yeah, that's kind of where things are in terms of gaming and stuff. And I think these are going to be the things that sort of hold me over until the NBA season starts in 2 months, which again, I'm perfectly fine taking a little bit of a break from basketball because I had been just obsessed with the NBA for for almost like a whole year. So I'm okay taking a little bit of a break here. But yeah, that's going to do it for now. Just wanted to do kind of a quick catch up on some stuff. If anything pops up, I will talk about it most likely on Monday. So just that's going to be kind of the next time I record, and I'm going to just, combine these two recordings for this week's episode. All right, recording this on August 18th. It is a Monday. Just doing a quick little catch up on some weekend stuff, along with what I am looking forward to for the rest of this week. Definitely, it was definitely one of those kind of starts to the week. Just kind of acclimating back after a little trip here. But I was absolutely not feeling the best this morning, whether it was just due to sleep or just kind of, adjusting back to kind of my regularly scheduled programming. It was tough, man, but I feel a little better now. I think it's just more, I've been a little negligent of the amount of sleep maybe that I've been getting over this past week and weekend. So maybe that's something that I just kind of need to get back to. As always, sleep is this kind of forever important factor. And I unfortunately have to be cognizant of that as long as I am alive. So that is something to monitor and take care of before I kind of, before it affects me further, But other than that, yeah, just feeling out of it in a way. Maybe just kind of, again, maybe just getting back to the swing of things. But anyway, I had a good weekend. It was just kind of following the trip that I talked about on, was it Saturday? I don't remember. I think it was on Saturday that I talked about just catching up on some stuff. And so now that I'm sort of fully back home, I've been playing a little bit of Witcher 3. I've been kind of just continuing to enjoy the hell out of that game. It's been just an absolute blast. I don't know what else to really add. Like, the fact that you can kind of change objectives just kind of on a whim, is so fun. It kind of has a similar, it's a bit, I wouldn't say it's fully open world, because a lot of the regions are separated out into different parts of the map, but it does have kind of that open world element where you are exploring something and you discover something else. For example, if you're doing a contract mission where you're trying to find a particular monster and get rid of it, instead you stumble across like this patch where there's like supposedly protected treasure from these other monsters, and you get distracted by that. It is very much in line with how I've been used to playing games, especially like Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom, especially with their kind of open world mechanics, right? Just getting distracted and sidetracked with all of these different things that are happening around you and in the world that you inhabit. And that's what really makes these types of games really work, I think. And I think nowadays, after it's been 8 years, probably more, since Breath of the Wild, I think there has been a bit of a stigma that's been attached to the concept of open world, and how maybe some of that has been a bit devalued over the course of its time, where developers and creators strive to create such a experience to the likes of a Breath of the Wild or a Skyrim, right? I mean, Skyrim and Elder Scrolls and some other games of decades past were sort of the initial kind of were some of the first games to kind of break through with that, and of course Grand Theft Auto. What am I talking about, right? But I do think that there has been sort of this stigma that's been attached to it, where, and especially in the case of Zelda, which I have talked about, where some of that is to its detriment, where you could have such an open-ended experience where other things, including stuff like the narrative and the story structure and that kind of stuff, are a bit diminished because of how you traverse through the world, and so some of the other elements might not hit as hard, and it might not be as effective, and so there is like a bit of that stigma that's kind of maybe attached to the concept of an open world game. And I think it is such like a catch-all title nowadays, you know what I mean? Like, you could really call so many different types of games and genres open world. I think when I hear that word, I envision things of the matter of the RPGs that I'm playing, right, where you are traversing a world that is interconnected, and it's pretty fluid in terms of there not being a ton of loading times or that kind of thing, where you can kind of seamlessly go from one part of this world to another. But I think in the case of The Witcher, and I'm assuming it's going to be a similar type of case with Cyberpunk 2077, where the layout of the game, the way in which the environment is constructed, lends itself to the gameplay elements. It lends itself to feeling incredibly immersed in this world, right? Where you feel like these inhabitants and the people that the NPCs that are a part of this world feel very much lived in, right? I think that's kind of the goal. That is sort of like the thing that a lot of people really want. There's a reason why something like Grand Theft Auto is so successful and has been so successful, is because of this element of role play in a lot of ways, right? Which kind of, leads to things like Grand Theft Auto roleplay, which is an incredibly popular genre of game, or like, people, similar to kind of like a virtual reality sort of thing, or there's like another game that was sort of like virtual whatever, right? Where people kind of, not impose themselves, but see themselves in this world as as themselves, or they can role play as like a different type of character. Like there's so much that can be done there because of the space that the game inhabits, right? Like you can do so many different kinds of things. You could play as a criminal, you could play as like a lawyer, and all that kind of stuff. Obviously within the scope of a single player game like The Witcher 3 or Breath of the Wild, you're limited in terms of what you can kind of do, but you are still sort of cosplaying as this character in which you can decide to be a good or bad person, and you can kind of go about doing things in various ways. And with The Witcher 3, as I have talked about, there are consequences to your actions, right? So the way in which you maneuver through the world, and if you decide to kind of wreak havoc and just be just be like a criminal as you kind of would in a GTA game, there are consequences to that, which I think lends itself to feeling just more kind of immersion in this world. So I think that most of these open world games, quote unquote, I feel have been some of my favorite gaming experiences, if like done well. Like I have played like the good ones, right? I don't go out of my way to play, ones that are not as well received necessarily. So that is going to probably skew my, my vision. But I think that in this type of game where you can kind of do whatever, like of course the main objective is kind of the through line, but you could kind of do whatever you want to do. Like you can just take on all the contracts you want. You could, there's so much that you can do. But I just find that it's worked for me, like this type of game in bouts and in sort of this, in certain iterations and certain kind of, bits and pieces, it really works for me. So I've been really enjoying it. I don't know what else to really add. I do think there is something that I have kind of noticed, and this is something that I was kind of thinking about as I was continuing to play through The Witcher 3, is the writing. So I am very accustomed to writing in JRPGs, right? Predominantly Japanese role-playing games, where there is a specific style of writing for characters, for the narrative, the way in which certain ideas are conveyed, right? Of course, there is the language, component that you also have to take into consideration. But as I was playing through The Witcher 3, I was kind of thinking about like what this, what the game was doing a little differently versus, versus the majority of other games which I have played, which are, Japanese games, right? I think one of the bigger things that I've sort of noticed is the way, mature concepts are presented, right? I mean, this game is rated M for mature, but I think that there's a little bit more, like, it's not, I think with JRPGs in particular, there's a bit more of this, it's trying to kind of appeal to a more targeted demographic, right? A more younger demographic. So the writing is maybe at times a little bit more pointed, sometimes a little bit more obvious in terms of kind of questioning maybe the morality and the ethics of certain characters and that kind of thing, right? Where it's like, it's sort of, the main characters in those games are very pointedly looking at a situation and being like, this is bad because, and they sort of lay it out for you, right? What I've noticed with The Witcher 3, and this might just have to do with the fact that it is a mature game and that is meant to be played by adults, where when there are things and questions about, whether something is right or wrong, of course, you as the player have the decision to, you could have Geralt question that thing directly, be like, hey, isn't this like wrong? Isn't it wrong to slaughter all of these villagers just because they didn't pay you, money and that kind of thing? There are often more obvious cases like that, but sometimes there's a bit more nuance to things as well, which I think, where there's not really a clear answer. There's not this, there's not like a happy ending to a particular quest, right? And it kind of leaves you thinking about like whether whether there was something along the decision tree that you could have done to alter the eventual kind of ending of a certain plot line. And just have you kind of, think about those kinds of things. And I think that's kind of one of the things that maybe separates the writing from when you're trying to tell a story to an older audience versus like a younger audience, right? And there's like, I think it's a lot more like spelled out for you when you're playing, I don't know, just like a typical JRPG, right? I don't know, that's just something that I've really kind of noticed as I've made my way through The Witcher 3. Another thing that I've noticed with the writing and some of the language that is being used, and I guess this is something that you could maybe point to similarities with other RPGs and stuff, but I think it does like a very, concentrated effort in distinguishing different accents, different English accents. Like you have kind of like a vague sort of like French accent with the Nilfgaardians. You have a more typical English accent with like the Redanians. And then with the Skellige, they have more of kind of like a, Irish accent. And they're where they sort of, the islands in which they live are kind of like this mishmash of like Nordic cultures and then like Irish cultures and that kind of thing. So I thought that was very interesting. And then, both in the way in which they talk and also the certain letters that they use, I thought they do a pretty good job of distinguishing the different cultures and races and that kind of thing. I think another game, and I know this is, I'm kind of doing the thing of comparing this to other games that I've played, but another game that I think that kind of does this is also Dragon Quest XI actually does this pretty well, where different towns and different regions have certain dialects where, some of them have, kind of have a bit more of like a Scottish accent for a certain kingdom, and then some other villages have a bit more of like this like a bit more of like a Chinese accent, which I thought was really interesting, right? So I think this, there's some of that which I think is very comparable in a lot of instances, but it's cool. It's pretty cool to see that. I think with the writing, one of the things that I think is sort of important for me to be invested in the characters and the plot is how they sort of convey their actions and their ideas and that kind of thing, right? I think sometimes, especially with games that I have played, and this might be just due to the fact that, again, it might just be a thing of, I don't know, budgetary things. Like, this is a massive game which has been spent, like, so much time and resources have been poured into this game, so of course the quality is going to show. But I think there is like a bit more of like, you could have a lot more flavor text to certain characters who might be, I don't know, they might be like nervous or they might be like hiding something. I do think the voice acting definitely helps in that case as well, where if you maybe want to question a character's motives, you could kind of tell based on their facial expressions and their vocal performances and that kind of thing. But I think like the depth of like the NPC characters really add to this world as well, right? Like, there's so many different kinds of NPCs that kind of stick out to me that are like, oh yeah, this is like one of those characters that I'll remember once I finish this game, and I kind of look back on this journey, and I look at all of the interactions that Geralt has had in his journey. So it's like I think with like the writing, there's like certain things that stick out to me. I might have talked about this, but I do think the thing that like has like impressed me the most so far was the plot line with the Baron and his whole situation, and the fact that he's an incredibly flawed and might even you might even consider him to be like a bad person, and his sort of his kind of arc, if you want to call it that, which I still haven't seen like the completion of. I think there's still things that have yet to be resolved with his character, but I thought that storyline was so well executed up until this point, where he has had these issues with his wife and his kid, and the fact that he's kind of just coming to terms with his actions, and how he has to kind of where he's had to face them basically up front, in the form of like literal monsters and that kind of thing. So I think I thought that was like a really good example of like the strength of this game's writing and its character, development and that kind of thing. You know what I mean? There's been a lot of other like exciting moments throughout this game, but I would say in terms of like individual characters and like storylines, that was definitely the most compelling to me so far. Kind of going back to the point of like facing up against your own monsters or facing against like your demons, like I really do like the fact that these like fairy tales and these like mythical creatures are sort of intertwined with the personal issues that these characters face, right? Where, I don't know, for example, there are these like wraith enemies that are sort of like the remnants, the spirits of like women who like died tragically and who are still kind of like clinging on to life, but in a form of this sort of ethereal creature, right? And there's like a personal story tied to that. Yeah, I mean, I think again, like there's like literal demons and literal monsters that sort of appear, and that are an obstacle for Geralt, but are sort of an embodiment of something else that maybe another character is dealing with. And I really like that kind of like juxtaposition where there's like a literal form of an issue that you have that has come to like maybe haunt you, and in order to put that to rest, you have to kind of come to terms with the thing that you've been dealing with, right? Like you could kick the can down the road as far as you can, but who knows, that might just come back to like that might come back to affect you further down the line. So I kind of like that. That's a very like common theme and common idea that sort of I guess you see it pretty frequently throughout the game and in various quests and side quests and that kind of thing. And so I think that's a really interesting thing that I kind of wanted to note. But yeah, good stuff. I think the one, I would say like the only my only like minor criticisms that I have of The Witcher, I think are much more related to the game mechanics, I would say. As I've said before, like the combat is really not my favorite thing. Like I'm okay with it, but I'm also not playing at the most difficult level. And I think some of the menuing can be a little bit much too. Like, there are so many different things that you can kind of engage with, which I've barely scratched the surface on, including things like alchemy and just like building, I don't know, building bombs and other types of weaponry, when I've really only the only thing that I've really employed is a sword and then like the fire spell, right? Because it's just simple. There's a little bit of that kind of like menuing that is a little bit, not my favorite thing, which I think is kind of like a similar issue to something like Tears of the Kingdom, where you have to, when you're attaching things to like your bow and arrow and trying to use that, there's like a pause menu and that kind of thing. I'm just like it's not my favorite thing. I'd rather be kind of in the flow of like the action, and I don't really want to be super, trying to like figure out like how exactly to equip a certain item and that kind of thing, right? I would say like another thing too is I still haven't figured out how to traverse or like is there like a quick menu for like the world map? Like, this is probably something I can look up, but you just kind of have to like, every time to open up the world map, you have to like click into it. You have to click the main menu and then click into the world map, when I wish it was maybe just like a single button. I don't know, maybe there's a way I can kind of map it to work it that way. So that's like kind of a little annoying, because I do like to see where I am in the world. One more thing, I don't like riding the horse. I'm sorry, it's just not like fun. Like, it is so much easier to just run through the fields with Geralt instead of calling Roach, getting on the horse, trying to kind of like, maneuver and trying to angle the horse in a particular way so that it's following along the path. Like, sure, it can be quicker, but honestly, I found it's just easier to run with Geralt. You know what I mean? Just run from village to, location where the quest might be. That's just kind of what I've been used to. I've just barely have used the horse unless it's like absolutely needed, right? So that's been kind of the, just like a few things here and there that I haven't been the biggest fan of, but it's mostly related to some minor gameplay mechanics. Okay, now looking forward to the week ahead, and in particular tomorrow. This was something that this is like one of the biggest things that I was really excited for when I watched the Switch 2 reveal back in May. Was it May or April? I don't remember. And the announcement was for Kirby Air Riders, which is the sequel to Kirby Air Ride, which I considered to be one of my favorite GameCube games back in the day. I just played I played so much of it when I was younger. So the fact that this game like just kind of popped up was a surprise, because I just had not even considered that this game would be brought back. And now, tomorrow, they're doing, and it sounds like, Masahiro Sakurai is a part of the presentation. They're doing a 45-minute presentation on Kirby Air Riders, which is crazy. Like, that sounds like a lot, but I'm very intrigued on watching it, and I'm kind of interested in watching it live as well, which means I may be getting up a little early for that. But this is like, it's really exciting. I think I'm very interested in seeing, I really don't want to speculate too much because I have no idea what to expect. Of course, I would love for there to be some type of city trial or like a revamped version of city trial. I would just play that to death. But, considering the fact that the original game was predominantly it was a racing game, right? And the fact that it is announced to be coming out later this year, that, in tandem with something like Mario Kart World, like how is it going to be able to sort of differentiate the racing style of this game versus Mario Kart World, right? What is it going to be able to do differently? are the other mechanics going to be kind of the things that really sell it, which I think that would be really the main draw. Like the biggest draw for me was City Trial with the original game. So, that's going to be, I have no idea. Like we just saw a teaser trailer for this, no gameplay or anything like that. And so now that they're doing like a 45-minute video on this, which is kind of crazy for Kirby Air Riders, is fascinating. So I think just hearing them kind of announce this direct was a big surprise, and it kind of caught my attention again because I kind of, I hadn't forgotten about Kirby Air Riders, but I had sort of put it off to, it wasn't like the thing that came to mind when, looking at things about the Switch 2, right? It was like, okay, we heard about this game. Is it going to come out? It's not really, it doesn't feel like it's going to come out. And now that we're getting a direct and getting more information on it, it has reinvigorated kind of my interest in this game. And just sort of like thinking about, the nostalgia factor of playing this game when I was younger and stuff, or playing the original game when I was younger. So I'm going to check it out. I'm going to check out the direct. I feel very inclined to want to say that I want to pick this one up already, even not knowing anything about it. But, maybe I could practice a little patience and see what this game's about. Who knows? Like maybe the game, based on the presentation, is not really that interesting at all, and maybe it's they go in a completely different direction. But I have faith that it's going to be good, and there's going to be something different about it from the original release that there's going to be like a new hook to it, I think. So I'm excited to see what this is about, and another game on the list, even though it hasn't come out yet. So that's good. But yeah, that's really something. I think there was speculation that there might be there might be like a September direct or something like that, but the fact that they're coming out with like an entire direct for Kirby Air Riders it's pretty crazy. So I'm excited to check that out, and just wanted to do a quick little catch up on some stuff outside of these next couple days. I don't know really what else to expect, but just kind of keeping my eyes peeled. There is Gamescom going on in Germany, which is a pretty big gaming showcase and event. So there might be some additional video game releases and announcements that might come out of that. So that might be something that I may discuss. But yeah, until later this week, that is going to do it for this episode. Thanks for listening as always. This has been Save the Semantics. Signing off.